All right, so we're figuring it out. Hi and welcome. This is Maker Showcase. We are a quarterly event that is hosted and sponsored by Asmbly. And the mission of this event is to provide a platform for anyone to showcase their project, to share knowledge, and cultivate relationships. Which is why we built in these break in between presentations. So I highly recommend you take advantage of that and maybe talk to someone new. Because frankly, I think we could all use more places to bring people together rather than drive us apart. So let's get started. We'll start with 2 presentations, and then we'll do a 30 minutes break in the middle, and then we'll have dedicated Q&A session at the end of each presentation. So if you don't get to answer your questions, hunt them down during the break time. Let's see. Okay, so also for those of you who are new, we do have a facility tour at 3 p.m. scheduled by the front lobby, which is the new expanded area. So that's very exciting. It's a good place to learn a bit about Asmbly and what it is that we do. And now, our first presenter today is a media table built by Michael Ballas.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks, everybody, for coming. So I want to walk you through the conception and design and build of something I call a media table. And I'm going to start with, like all good stories, once upon a time. So once upon a time, I had something called a home theater PC. This is around the year 2000. I copied all my CDs onto it. I actually literally threw them away, and today that's not such a strange thing, right? Media without physical devices. So it had a touch screen. It was a 7-inch touch screen. I ran something that played FLAC files. This is a lossless format. So back in the day, it was fine for then, but today it looks dated because it is. So fast forward to not that long ago. Not that long ago, I had this laptop, and the hinge broke on it. And I was trying to repair the hinge. And apparently, this is a common problem with this particular laptop. So I tried to repair it. I wound up cracking the screen. So, and I called HP. No, we don't stock that screen anymore, so you're stuck with it. But it turns out that I could plug a monitor into it, an external monitor, and it still worked just fine. So I thought, what do I do with this thing, right? I can't, it's not a laptop, it's not really a computer. And I thought back to my days of having the multimedia PC, which didn't have a big enough screen. So that was my thought, okay, let me create a dedicated machine just for playing media. That's not, from the year 2000. So my first prototype looked like this. And so sort of my theme in building things is design thrice, measure twice, and cut once. And by thrice, I mean 30, or thereabouts, right? The more design I do, the more evolution, the better the end result. And I think you builders kind of know that, right? So the first thought I had was taking a standard 19-inch rack cabinet. You can buy these empty, cutting a hole in it, and putting a touchscreen, and then my dead laptop would be underneath it. So that was sort of the first idea. And of course, we designed at least 3 times, or 30. And so this was sort of my next rendition. I thought, well, it needs a keyboard, because some things are hard to do with just fingers and touch. It needs a custom volume knob, because those rotary knobs are way more ergonomic than having to push a button over and over, right? So this is sort of the next version of it. And then I thought, well, metal, that's still looking like the old 2000 multimedia PC, so let me go with wood, right? I know I've got this beautiful facility here. I can do woodworking. And so I started Googling, how do I make a wooden case for this thing, right? And this is off the internet. And it turns out there's kind of this specialty sort of device called a plinth, which people who are nostalgic like me, I don't have one of these, and I didn't know about it until I started Googling for this box. But basically, they build these beautiful pieces of wood, and you drop a turntable into it. So that got me thinking, turntable. Media, okay. So my next design was smashing those two things together. So this is a rendering. This never really existed. And I do renderings kind of a old-fashioned way. I take Photoshop, and I take different photos, and I kind of piece them together. If you look carefully, you'll notice this lid doesn't quite line up with that box, because I dropped this prototype of the surface, right? And here I'm going with a touch pad, right? That's kind of getting there, so I decided to build it. And never underestimate the power of Scotch tape and cardboard. This is actually corrugated plastic cardboard, but it's still cardboard. And I thought, okay, I got to build it because I got to think about how much space do I need, for the box to be. Is it actually going to work, right? And there's an external monitor over here, so it worked. That was good. But then I realized, well, how do I turn this thing on and off? I mean, this laptop has one of these buttons over here dedicated to turning it on and off. It's going to be buried. So I thought, okay, solenoid. The solenoid, for those of you that don't know, it's a mechanical device that pushes down, okay. And so I wired this solenoid. I used epoxy to kind of make a frame for it. And lo and behold, that works. So this button actually triggers voltage to the solenoid that would turn it on, right? But then I thought, well, I got to see if it's on, because it's buried. I don't really know if I don't get a signal. So there's a little LED on the key for power that turns on when the power's on. Okay, photosensor. So I have a photosensor here that I bought off of eBay, not eBay, sorry, Amazon, this little circuit that triggers a solenoid based on light. So that triggers, there's a lamp in here. So you can actually see on the front whether it's on or not. Okay, problem solved. Right? So I keep going. And I got to build the base of the enclosure. Now, I'm not a materials guy, so I have this secret weapon, not so secret, called ChatGTP. So I tell ChatGTP, I need to build a plate that's going to hold this much weight, and it's got to be this size. Okay, and what material should I use? How thick does it need to be? And it started going through, well, there's this thing called Young's modulus that designers, materials people use, and based on your specs, I recommend 3 millimeter thick 304 aluminum. I thought, okay, that's pretty cool. And I thought, that's pretty thick. So I said, well, what if it's 2 millimeter? And by the way, it said with 3 millimeter, the center of it will sag like 0.05 inches or some, like it gave a very specific answer to my question, right? So I said, well, what if it's just 2 millimeters? And it said, well, based on 2 millimeters, it'll sag like 0.1 inches. And I thought, well, that's good enough because it's going to be screwed around the edges. So anyway, I find so many uses for ChatGPT, and I'm sure like all of you have. And assisting with design is one of them. Okay. And then I thought, well, I got to do better on this front panel thing, this whole knob thing. So there's something called a Stream Deck. I'm sure some of you are familiar with. It's mostly used for gamers and streamers, but I think streaming more than gamers. But I use it already for office productivity. So I have the large Stream Deck. I've got buttons for launching Outlook, for launching all kinds of programs. But I thought, let me get a dedicated one just for this media device. And so I downloaded, I kind of borrowed, like you can recognize icons for things like Spotify, but I borrowed some of these others, and I came up with an icon set, and I used something called AutoHotkey. It's a scripting language where you can tie a particular keystroke to any number of commands, and they can change function based on detecting things. It's a programming language basically that converts one keystroke to another set of keystrokes or launching a program. So for example, like when you hit Spotify, even though this is a PC, it operates more like a Mac. If it's already launched but minified, it maximizes it. If it's not launched, it launches it and maximizes it. And if it's already maximized and you press it, it minimizes it. So it becomes really easy to turn something on and off that way, or display it or not. So this is a rendering, but the bottom is a photograph. I had to wind up using these right-angle cables on the sides of the laptop, just because I didn't want to, like if you use a regular straight cable, you need another couple of inches on either side, right? And I'm trying to maximize the space here. The monitor is upside down on purpose. It brings it closer to what would be the front, where the person would be standing here, right? So just having Windows flip the screen allows the monitor to be a little lower. And I took a lot of sort of effort in Amazon trying to find the right monitor to just fit, to maximize, but make it 16:9 so that I can send it to my big screen without having to change the aspect ratio. So this is kind of an update of the Surface components. And then I went to Fusion 360 to actually convert the design of the box into the pieces parts. So this is a final design. I added VU meters, nostalgia, but it also tells you, well, if the needle's moving and you don't hear any sound, there's something wrong. As opposed to the needle's not moving, then there's no signal, right? So this is actually the final design. Again, this is a rendering. This is not a real photograph. That's a real photograph. So after the build, and that's one of my tests, is how close did what I visualized come to what I actually built, right? By the way, Charles Leninger, he has a shop here in Austin. He builds beautiful furniture. He actually built the box for me. I didn't do that myself, but I handed him the Fusion 360 files. He kind of cleaned them up. And this is ash wood. Yeah, and it worked, but it didn't work perfectly. No surprise there, right? So one of the things I realized, it gets really hot in there. There's no, most such components have ventilation slots on the top, obviously, because convection is how heat dissipation occurs. This does not. It doesn't have any holes on the sides either. I'd put slots in the back, thinking convection, and the base plate has a lot of slots on it, thinking that would be good enough. No, it wasn't good enough. So the next version, I had to put fans in there. There were some other issues I'll talk about. But one of them was just this notion of using an old, broken laptop. Like, what if that breaks? Now what do I do, right? So I went for a real actual computer from an unpronounceable Chinese company. So this fit perfectly. This is a D to A. It's kind of I wouldn't call it the most expensive DNA, but it's a D to A, but it's not the cheapest. It actually outputs a balanced XLR signal, which is a much cleaner signal than your standard audio, consumer audio, but it also sends the consumer audio to this preamp for the VU meters. So you get the VU meters and the actual output at the same time. The fans are here. One of them is tied to the sensor for whether the PC is on or not. So the fan automatically turns on when the PC turns on. The other one is tied to, I put a button in for turning the monitor on and off. So I have something called theater mode, where what you want to do is, if you're watching a movie at night and you have all your lights off in your home, you don't want these meters to be distracting you from the movie. You don't want like a duplicate, reflection of the screen coming up. So this button on the right turns all the lamps off, basically, and the screen. The problem with that was, and before I get to this circuit, don't worry too much about the circuit. The problem with that was I used a relay to turn the USB-C power line on and off to the monitor, because again, I can't access the actual button, right, which is buried under the box. Well, that caused USB resets, and if I'm not a double E, but for those of you that are, you're probably cringing to hear the idea of using a relay to turn power on and off to a monitor. So I went back to my secret weapon, ChatGTP. I said, well, I got this relay. I'm trying to turn USB on and off. it's not working too well. And it said, no, you need to use a MOSFET. It's a kind of transistor. So it's a digital switch instead of a mechanical switch. And I said, well, which one should I use? I mean, there's hundreds of them, right? Well, how much power do you need? I said, I don't know, but here's the name of the monitor. Here's the model, and it said, oh, that's a 19-volt, 3-amp supply, so you need this particular MOSFET will do just great. So, this is something even 5 years ago didn't exist, right? I can design things in domains like materials engineering and material engineering and electrical engineering that I have no real subject matter knowledge of, right? So, secret weapon, keep that in mind. The other thing I didn't like about this design, these hinges they have springs in them, and so these are actually vintage hinges that I did find on eBay that are for an old Technics turntable. The problem is that turntable is not quite as big as this, and therefore the lid doesn't generate as much force. So these hinges don't hold this up. I had to prop something in here for the photograph. And also black hinges, I don't know. So what I thought I'd do is build my own hinges. Okay, and these hinges go just past 90 degrees, so the lid will stay open. It doesn't need springs. And I thought, well, instead of black, I want it clear, just like the lid, right? So this is acrylic sheet, acrylic. I built it here. And again, you can Google. This time I didn't ask ChatGPT, but I Googled how do I find out, how to build a hinge. And so these are actually the pieces parts that, or an image of them that were cut. And even the axle itself is acrylic. So it's a completely clear hinge, minus the screws. So, so there you go. Oh yeah. Well, I kind of showed you the final image, but oh yeah, this is with some of the updates. But like the hinge, for example, I think it looks cleaner than the black ones. This is the back of it, just to show you. I used Oshcut for the metal cutting, both for the top, the bottom, and the back plate. So basically, any kind of output that I think I want, it's got the balanced professional audio outs. It's got the consumer outs. It's got a digital out. Video, of course, both kinds of USB-C and A, right? And power in, and I do use ground, so I grounded all the metal to be compliant and, for safety. And this is what it looks like in the wild, being my living room. So I'm quite happy with it. So that's my presentation. I'm happy to take some questions and answers before I turn it back over to Alex.
Great, awesome. Thank you, Michael. If anybody have any questions, raise your hand, please, and then I'll pass the mic to you.
So what do you think in total, like number of hours it took? What do you think that was?
A lot. Probably hundreds, and I would say most of those were in the revision of the design. It was actually like over a 9-month period of off and on.
So if you had to do it again, like what do you think it would take now?
It's kind of hard to say because I don't think I could have arrived at this design if it was compressed. But if I had to build another one,
right? Like
okay, right. Yeah, I'm sure like a lot of builders I underestimate. So I mean, now that it's kind of already there, I would say maybe 100 hours, maybe more though. Thank you.
Any other questions?
For the lid, you made the whole lid, right?
I didn't mention that. So I outsource the lid as well. So there's a company that builds display boxes. Like if you go to a jewelry store, you see this beautiful clear box, and you spec the thickness of the material as well as the dimensions, all 3 dimensions. And you could build this yourself. I mean, basically, it's just acrylic. There's a certain kind of acrylic. It's called, people would call it glue, but it's actually, it melts the acrylic. Yeah, it's a solvent. So you could build it, but I just had them do it. And that's another thing I want to just mention, that's a good point, is we don't think you have to build something all by yourself, right? I mean, obviously you're not going to like manufacture, I'm not going to manufacture VU meters, right? So just think about, at least the way I think about it, and there is an inherent pleasure in building something, right, obviously. But the way I think about it, I want the end result. I want to do some of it, but I don't want to do all of it. So I outsource that out.
Very cool.
If you want to make exact same one like this, how much would it cost?
Talk to me afterwards. I have applied, by the way, I have a company that's helping me apply for a utility and a design patent. The design patent they think is going to be a no-brainer. And for those of you that don't know, design patent just means you have something that looks unique. So if you make a chair that's a unique look, you're probably going to need a design patent on it, but you won't get a utility patent because the utility of a chair is already there, right? So that's the sticky point. But yeah, if you're, you know, and I'm dabbling with this idea, like can I patent it? At what level? How safe is that going to be? Can I either farm it out to another company to build, or do I want to build more of them? But yeah, well, we can talk about that.
Right. Any other questions?
So what was the big lesson learned doing all of that?
I'd say there were a lot of lessons learned. I guess the biggest one that is just continuing to refine the design before I even like build one thing whatsoever. I think that was the big lesson.
Oh yeah. So did you ever did you have a lot of times where it was like, okay, I'm kind of done with this and I'm just going to put it away, and then you come back to it later, or were you like kind of driven to build it?
I was kind of driven. It was a nice excuse to not do things like housework.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, also there is a sort of incubation thought that I have of like you know the old adage, sleep on it. It really does make a difference. I mean, not literally one night and not literally, but maybe it is sleep. But somehow just delaying things and keep thinking about it off and on, but not all day long, I think does help in the final result.
Anyone else? All right, let's give him a
All
round
right.
of applause. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Oh yeah.
All right, give us a few minutes and we'll get ready for the next presentation. All right, awesome. Thanks for waiting. And next we have Taylor and Renee's rotating bookshelf.
All right.
Okay, I see a lot of familiar faces, but I'll introduce myself. Hi, I'm Renee.
And I'm Taylor, and this presentation is called Can We Build It?
Maybe. That's what we asked ourselves.
But just a little bit about ourselves first. Go ahead.
Okay, so we were previously members last year from January to April, and in that time we built a stool.
And nothing else.
And nearly nothing else. Yeah, exactly. But we returned this year in January, and we've been members since then. And this time we made a lot more stuff. Some
Way
of that
more
stuff
stuff.
you'll see over there. That includes the T-shirts that we're wearing.
Yep. And the hat that I'm wearing.
And the hat that he's wearing. This bag that I made this art for and took sublimation class and printed it on there.
Yeah. So coming back this year, we definitely had different goals. We were trying to like find new experiences and learn new tools, but also trying to exercise different parts of our creativity and also solve specific problems that we encounter at home.
Yeah.
Just to highlight some of the things that we've made that I'm particularly proud of, these marble board games are based on a homemade board game my grandmother's had for as long as I can remember that I've played my whole life. That's a picture of her and my uncle playing it with me a few years ago. That we, after taking CNC class, made some other versions of it, including a custom 2-player version of it that I designed for Renee and I on Valentine's Day.
Some of the things that I've made that are right in front of me are chainmail earrings. I actually got started because I broke my finger at work. That is the x-ray of the literal fracture of my finger. This happened in December. So I was like, shit, I am stuck at home and on a lot of drugs for painkillers. So what did I start doing? I had some charms and I was like, I really want to just make some earrings for fun. And that went down this rabbit hole of like, well, I was at, what's it called? I was at Hobby Lobby and in the jewelry section, and I'm like, oh, look at all this chainmail stuff, like, or jump rings, and I can make chainmail. And then that led me down a deeper rabbit hole while I was here of like, okay, now I can laser cut stuff. And that's what all of this stuff in the back is. So that's just something I'm really proud of that I've kind of gotten to do here.
And importantly, a hobby that she can do with only 3 fingers.
Oh yeah, because this one, yeah, broken, gauzed up. So.
And our rotating bookshelf, which is the main focus of our presentation today. Inspiration / the problem for this. I'll let you go ahead and take this one.
Oh, okay, yeah. This image right at the very end are all my books. And this isn't even all of them, but this is the problem, is that I was at a dollar store and I saw in their like little furniture section these little like 2-shelf nightstands. And I was like, yeah, I'll just stack those on top of each other, throw some books in there and call it a day. But that's the problem. They have no actual home.
And I keep getting targeted advertisements for things like this on Instagram, and the Asmbly brainworm keeps telling me, I can make that. And so I sent a DM to Renee of this particular ad, and I just said, let's build this. And that was, as you can see, March 23rd.
Yeah,
and this is the eventual goal of what we are working towards, a taller version of this bookshelf. On the other hand, the second problem was that I have this whiteboard in my office that this bookshelf sits in front of, and having to lean over this bookshelf to write on the whiteboard is just annoying enough. I decided to make a bookshelf about it. Because this will cut down on just enough of the wall space that I can walk up to the whiteboard and use it, and it won't annoy me. Also, all of the books for this are a consistent size, so we thought that made it a good prototype candidate for the first version of this thing we were going to build. And also, it's mine, so if we mess it up, at least we didn't mess hers up.
That's fine. That's fine.
And so we can learn all of our lessons here and then make a good one later.
We did learn a lot of lessons this one.
As far as planning goes, I don't like reinventing the wheel, so we wanted to try to find a similar concept. We found a YouTuber called Pneumatic Addict who made a similar version of this rotating bookshelf. The video was very thorough and gave us a lot of really good insight into like the types of materials that we would need, like a heavy-duty Lazy Susan that can supposedly support up to 1,000 pounds, which I think is sufficient for a bookshelf. And also edge banding the plywood, which is a thing Renee and I were not super familiar with as a concept before we dove into this project, so it was good to know what we were getting ourselves into. But also good insights into like the process and constraints we were gonna face, like how we were gonna need to use pocket holes to secure this sort of awkward shelf alignment to the walls, which I'll talk about in a second, but also that each of the walls need to be one piece in order for it to be pretty structural, so that affects like what we can build on a given size of stock. And in addition to those things, it also gave us a lot of good insight into the things we wanted to change. Like we didn't want to have these drawers on the bottom. We also wanted the walls to be wider so that generally the covers aren't being seen through the walls here. And we wanted it to be different dimensions so that it could accommodate my larger Dungeons and Dragons books and also fit in the space that I needed it to fit in for my whiteboard. So I started out with a Fusion 360 rendering. This was basically my first attempt at doing anything in 3D design, and my conclusion is largely that CAD is hard.
I'm going to quickly jump in and say here that I went to architecture school where I had to learn a lot of like 3D rendering programs. And I was like, I'm done with it. So Taylor, you go ahead and take the lead there. You learn how to use them and
For those
draw
that
it
can't
up.
read this footnote here says, Renee went to architecture school. Taylor is the one who doesn't know anything about CAD. But I'm really glad that we started here because it ended up being a really valuable point of reference, not only for us to have a very visual goal of like, this is the thing we want to build, like something to aspire to, but it also was really nice for a lot of the folks that I see in here when they would ask me, oh, what is it that you're working on? I could just pull this picture out of my phone and go, this is what it's gonna be. And it ended up being a really good rendering of like, it's very clearly a bookshelf with a base that it rotates on, and I thought it did a really good job of communicating the goal of this project in a way that gave us a goalpost, right? We did all of our cut planning in VCarve, and you might be thinking, oh, is this a CNC project? No, I'm very comfortable using the software because it uses real units, and I don't have to try to convert things in like Photoshop or Affinity Design or Illustrator type of stuff. So we did all of our sheet planning here. We actually did all of our cuts on a table saw, mostly because I was concerned about how the CNC bits might interact with the plywood. And as you can see, on a 5x5 sheet of plywood, we didn't really have a lot of room for error to like sand our problems away in case the CNC did not play nice. So we had some clearance issues there that using the thinner kerf on the table saw we're going to help with. Grain direction was also something that we needed to keep in mind here because all 4 of these vertical panels need to all be facing the same direction. So nesting these things together in a really specific way was important, which brings us to issue number 1. Learning how to use a track saw was not in scope for this project, and I could not figure out a way to reduce the size of this stock by making straight cuts all the way through here. Luckily, I realized this in this design phase of it, and we were able to rearrange these pieces.
I'm gonna jump in again. Actually, I realized, I was like, hey, why don't you just flip them?
I was sitting in the lobby
this one,
here
this one,
going,
this one, this
oh
one."
my God, we're gonna have to learn how to use the track saw, and I don't know if I want to learn how to do that. And she goes, I think you have enough room if you just flip these 2 things around and move it down. And I was like, oh, that's great. So then materials, this is gonna be very short. We bought a 5-foot sheet of plywood at Fine Lumber just behind us here. We used about 60 foot of iron-on edge banding for all of the edges that we got on Amazon. The Lazy Susan, which you unfortunately cannot see sandwiched in here, we also got on Amazon, and then screws, of course. Process-wise though, so doing all of that planning and that design work in advance, solving that first problem, let us make rough cuts on the panel saw to take that 5-foot sheet into smaller, more manageable sizes that we could then do our repeatable cuts on the table saw. All of the shelves are square, and these are, everything's a rectangle, so we were able to do all of these cuts just with the saw stop and the fence. We did all the edge banding and sanding. Here's James cheering us on while we were doing it in the shop one night. I think that this came out really good for us basically being first timers to this. We got a lot of really great pointers from Michael Morris, who happened to be in the space the day that we were starting it. And then we did pocket hole drilling. I'll talk about issue number 2 in a second. But first I want to talk about how cool this machine is. Austin told me that it was hiding underneath one of the session tables where it has lived until the woodshop had more space. And it's basically a pocket hole jig as a power tool that I didn't know we had in the space. I asked Austin, can I borrow a pocket hole jig? I know that you have one. And he went, hey, let me show you how to use this thing instead. And we ended up making all 16 of the pocket holes we needed to in like 20 minutes. It was fantastic. Issue number 2, however, is that we didn't do a test cut on a different sheet of plywood, and the pocket hole bit didn't go all the way through the edge of the edge banding the first time. So we had to realign some of our holes and re-drill them, which ended up not being a huge issue, but was just like oh yeah, remember to do your test cuts. Then in order to align the shelves, the assembly for this is kind of awkward because we have to attach the walls to the shelves instead of like building a box and putting shelves into it. So we basically just measured the bottom and top of all of the shelves from the base of each of these walls so that we could clamp and square them up when we were fastening them. Fastening them brings us to issue number 3. if you ever see me making this face in the shop, give me 10 minutes. The issue we had here was the very first pocket hole screw that I put in drove through very slightly the edge of my plywood, which I sanded away, and no one will probably ever even notice unless they're running their fingers against it, but I was mad. Totally fine though, like I said, this is the prototype. It's okay if we screw mine up. And, but this is what I mean about attaching the walls to the shelves. We kind of had to lay the shelf down on the side and then fasten the walls to the edges of it in kind of a strange and awkward way. Assembling the Lazy Susan, being step number 7, that's issue number 4. I'll talk about that in a second. We should have done this later. But basically this is just centering up and putting down the Lazy Susan on one piece and then drilling a hole through the bottom plate here so that it can be fastened from underneath to the inside, because Lazy Susan doesn't come apart and then smash back together. That was issue number 5, which is that I don't know how to use a Forstner bit, and I ended up just using it to drill through this thing, and then it snapped the last layer of my plywood and took a big chip out. Another sort of frustrating thing, but again, sanded it away, and it's on the very bottom of this bottom plate, so no one will ever see it, except for you right now. This is why issue number 4 was a thing, because as you can see, I need to put a screw here, but I also need to put a screw right here, and I can't rotate the bottom of the base enough to get that clearance that I need to put that second screw in. So we actually needed to assemble the Lazy Susan after attaching the base to the bottom of the shelf. And then we attached the base, or the top, I guess, the hat to the shelf. This is a video of Renee and I putting the last 2 screws in it yesterday. Procrastinators, as always.
Tabletop? You're up on top of the table?
No, no. This is a completely different table. Different space. No one worry about that. But this is the result. I brought in some of my books from home that I specifically sized to for the shelf. All of my Dungeons & Dragons books are roughly 8.5 by 11, so that was why this shelf ended up being on a wider base and taller, was to accommodate those books. And it works, and it spins, and this is the first time I put anything on it, so I'm glad it's surviving. But what's next? So shelf number 2, we have to plan for a larger shelf. That probably means we're going to have to do Renee's shelf on a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet of plywood so that we can get the length that we need for those continuous walls. We'll probably also experiment with shelves that have different heights, like maybe some are 10 inches or some are 8 inches to more snugly hold different size books. We also definitely want to stain that one. We were going to do it on this one, but we ran out of time and I didn't want to learn another new thing. But we've also been thinking about interesting things that we could do with, to give these walls some characters, either doing like inlays or carves on the CNC or epoxy if I wanted to go really crazy. But the last thing that I want to do, though, before we wrap this up, is I want to give some special thanks to some folks, part of the Asmbly community. Robert specifically for getting a 5-foot sheet of plywood to the space for me in his pickup truck and giving me a ride to find lumber to pick it up. Austin for showing me how to use the Craig Foreman jig. Michael Morris, who again showed us how to do the edge banding, gave us a lot of really great tips, and I think that it came out pretty great as a result. James and India Freeman for kind of being our cheerleaders at the space a lot and just kind of encouraging us and being good pals. Steve Wiesenthal for helping me decomplicate a lot of parts of this process I was trying to really complicate. Michael Leonard and Joaquim for hosting the CNC and laser SIGs, which we have been going to for the last couple of months and we enjoy a lot. Jordan also, who taught our very first small lasers class where when we first started getting into the space. And there was one other specific thing you wanted to mention.
Oh, she's also just been a cheerleader.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Jordan has just been around and helping us out. She taught the class that we made our shirts and my hat and stuff like that. And also for Valerie, who reminded me you needed to register to sign up for this event.
You can't just show up.
Because without that, we had made this specifically for that thing, and then like a week or 2 ago, I was like, oh yeah, we're gonna do that for this thing. And she was like, have you signed up? And I was like, oh, right. The other shout out I wanted to give to Jordan, even though she is sick right now, was also for organizing this event. That was the other thing I meant. And also, I wanted to give a big shout out to everyone who has seen us in the shop and just given us words of encouragement in the form of a hell yeah throughout this project. People like Keith and Brian and Nathan and Austin and you know, and Adam and and Michael and Carson and Michael and
Michael. And then the other Michael.
But yeah, seriously, like the community aspect here, being able to pick each other's brains and just get that little wind in our sails when we're even going through the rougher parts of projects is part of why I really like being here. So, so can we build it?
Yeah. We did it!
And here, we'll take one of the mics to give to
Oh,
them.
yeah.
Take that.
You got it?
We
Take
pass
this
this
one?
one back for you.
All right, time for questions. Anyone?
I don't know the answer to this question, but I've been wondering with those pocket screws. When do you decide to use like pocket screws versus dowels versus biscuits or whatever for joining
I
things?
don't know the answer to that question. The reason we did this was primarily because I did not want to glue it, and I did not want to brad it because there is a version of the future where we disassemble this thing to stain it. So it was more about trying to make something that would be definitely secure to be stable, and I could take it apart later if I wanted to. But unfortunately, I don't actually know the answer to that. In the future, I would probably do something a little bit more like some different kind of joinery instead of using the screws. You will never see them with it being a bookshelf, but having the pocket holes on the underside is something we could improve. But yeah, it was mostly just about trying to guarantee it would be structural and it would hold.
Thanks.
So does it fit snugly against the wall and still rotate, or do you have to like kind of like corner it?
Yeah, you're gonna love this. We just finished it last night, so we haven't even taken it home yet
Right.
to test fit it.
But you do have to have like a little. I had considered putting it on a round base that's about the hypotenuse.
That's
of
what I
this
was wondering,
triangle.
yeah.
So it does not sit snugly in the corner. It can be pushed snugly into a corner, but it won't rotate.
Right.
But the circular base is. One, it wouldn't have fit on the sheet that we were trying to cut it all out of. And then secondly, just aesthetically, it's not my jam. So we decided to make it square. But it still will save enough of the horizontal wall space, though, to solve the problem, even if it needs to be a few inches away from the wall.
Oh, it looks beautiful. Did you guys think of like a different way of doing it than the Lazy Susan, like for rotations or anything like that?
I hadn't, mostly because it needs to sustain a lot of weight. And it works. It's great. And
But it is a great thing to consider and look into. Yeah.
I don't want to have to design it, I guess is what I'm really saying.
At the very beginning, you talked about your 2 different stints at Asmbly, and they yielded very different results. Why? Is there something about the space? Is it more life circumstance?
Okay. When we were members last year, I think that our primary focus was way more like, what are the projects that we want to work on? And we kind of ran out of projects we thought we wanted to work on. This time around, though, I think that we have engaged much more with like the community and the events and things like that. And that not only provides people for us to get like advice from or tips from, but it also gives us a lot of inspiration. And there are people who are here working on stuff I never would have thought people could work on by themselves, let alone like in a space like this in a community workshop. So doing that, I think, has driven us towards even further that worm digging into my brain of like, oh yeah, we could make that, because look at what these people are making, or look at what everybody else is doing here. Like, surely we can build a bookshelf that spins. Like, it feels very trivial, but we are also very proud of it to have made it, definitely.
What did you do on the edges that hide the plywood? And I don't see any trays for the screws. How did you cover it?
Yeah, so the screws you can still see on the top and the bottom, but the pocket holes on the inside come from the inside of the shelf, so they're basically right here, almost touching this wall. But the edge banding that we did, if you want to talk about for a second, it's this iron-on adhesive. So it's adhesive on one side, and you use the iron to heat it up, and it basically just adheres to these edges of the walls so that they look like real wood. So this is actually, underneath this is a plywood edge that we just put a little strip on to make it look real. Oh, that's
Did you have to
actually really good
sand
side by
it too, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
we sanded the corners to just blunt them a little bit. You have to trim them also. That's what that tool is over there. It's basically, you squeeze it and there's a razor blade on either side that trims it flush to the edges here, and then you just sand the corners. And again, we're not experts, but Michael Morris told us that's what to do. So
He walked
cool.
us through it. He's the only reason it looks this good.
Amazon. We just bought a giant spool of like 250 feet of it.
And then to say on top of that is that YouTuber that we watched, she's the reason we even knew about it. So YouTube DIY, I made this joke, but I was like, yeah, YouTube DIY is truly a great
Yeah.
resource. You're gonna learn so much just like watching videos and figuring stuff out.
We
and
definitely would have just left it looking like plywood and not even known better.
probably
So that's great.
Yeah, yeah.
So how confident do you feel that the shelves will hold up the weight of the books, especially when it's fully loaded?
Now seeing it, pretty confident. That's why I brought these in from home today, was because we finished building it and stashed it here overnight just yesterday. The only thing I'm worried about is that the Lazy Susan underneath is 12 inches in diameter and the shelf is 20 inches wide. So there's about a 4-inch overhang on each side. I was worried about that causing there to be some kind of instability or tilt, but it's fastened with 4 screws on both panels underneath. I'm really not that worried about it. And again, if it breaks, and we'll learn for next time. So
Very good.
Okay, any other questions?
I love the games over here. You know, was it like you might have talked about it, and I was eating pizza, but did you like what was the carving in there? How was that done?
which one, I'm sorry?
Just
The board games.
the board games over here.
We used the CNC.
Just the CNC, so it just dug it in for
It's
you. And stuff
basically
like
like
that?
100 drill cuts.
Gotcha.
Like,
Yeah.
And I came and started talking to folks at the CNC SIG about this because I was getting very close to making the most complicated drill press jig of all time. Before I went to my first CNC SIG and went, oh, that's what that machine is. And took the class in February and then designed in V-Carve this heart-shaped one so that we could have a 2-player version of this game for ourselves at home.
Right. Nice.
I'm just wondering about your earrings and your jewelry. Did you design those yourself, the actual laser cut itself?
Let's see. A lot of my inspiration for the chainmail ones is Pinterest.
Okay.
Straight up, I'm just on Pinterest scrolling, and I
Heard.
look at the ones that I'm like, I could do that.
Yeah.
Right? I can take those apart and put them back together. And then the laser cut ones, because I was just getting back this year into the laser machines, I went ahead and bought a file off Etsy.
Okay.
So these are truly just for me to show off that I did it, right? I did it, and that's what's really important, is getting to know the machine. My next step is going to be getting better at vector drawing, like
Which is a whole nother world in
which is a
itself,
whole
right?
other thing, girl. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
learning how to actually draw them, and now designing my own, which is the goal. So that I'm not selling somebody else's property or designs, and I make them more personal and more like, this is what I really like. This is what really feels special to me. What I want to put out into the world.
Yeah, oh, I get it.
Yeah. Thank you for the question.
And on that note, I do just want to brag about Renee really quick and also harp a little bit more about the community, just with this one thing. It's hard to see from the back, but these are actually, the inside of the star actually inlaid with clear acrylic, which is really cool. And the reason that we did this was because Renee had brought a version of these earrings to the Laser SIG, and a bunch of people were giving like suggestions about like, oh, these are other things that you could try out and do. Brian.
It was great. It was really good suggestions.
Who then saw us on that was in February. At the March Laser SIG, Brian was like, where are the earrings? Are you going to do anything with them? And we were helping finish up the expansion, so we weren't doing anything in February. And then when the April one came around, I told Renee, I was like, you've got to try the inlay thing. You know Brian's going to ask about it. We got to show Brian that we're doing it. And so, Renee did some tests, and I think they came out really great. And they look lovely.
Yeah. They look really good.
Thank you, Brian.
All right. Big round of applause for challenge. All right, so we'll take a 30-minute break, and then we'll come back for another presentation. See you soon. and his project is truck bed carrier.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. First time here. I'm a new member. I've been dreaming about joining Asmbly for 2-3 years. And finally, this year, I joined, took a whole bunch of classes. And now I'm proud to call myself active member. I am a truck driver, as in I own a truck, regular pickup truck. I also ride motorcycles, I ride bicycles, etc., etc. So lots of hobbies, and I get hurt often. Anybody else like me? Anyone else have pickup trucks? Also ride a bicycle, right? So we have problems. So that's how this idea came about that I'll talk about today. We carry bicycles in our pickup trucks, right? And what happens? You need a bicycle carrier that goes in the back of the truck, right? We carry motorcycles back of the pickup truck, and you need a motorcycle carrier for the pickup truck bed. We carry kayaks and canoes, and you need a canoe and kayak carrier. You guys get where I'm going, right? Fishing poles, you need a fishing pole carrier. And each of these things costs money, right? You buy one at a time. Oh, by the way, you have your fishing pole carrier, and you want to take your bicycle, you got to take the damn thing out, right? And you need a place to store it, right? And then you take it out, put the next one in, right? So always a project. Same thing with the snowboard, not here in Texas, but in some places that we don't go to. So it's a problem. So I thought, what if I solve my problem, and maybe I can solve some other people's problems too, right? So truck bed, bicycle carrier, motorcycle carrier, kayak carrier, fishing rod carrier, snowboard carrier. What if all was combined into one, right? So this was my first prototype, obviously, cheap plywood, and some 2x4s, and attached it to the side of the pickup truck with just these attachment hooks. And I wanted to see if this can hold any weight, 1/4-inch plywood. And it did. Lightweight bicycle, only 30 pounds, right? But it held. The idea was to see if this is something that is real. So I went around the block to see if this can actually be stable, and it was stable. But it was very clear that it needed a lot of improvement, obviously. I'm not going to put wood in the back of the truck, right? So then I decided the real thing had to be done. So I'm doing this in my garage. I don't know if this thing will work, but I didn't have a lot of tools, so I'm using my skill saw with the metal blade. So this is before I was Asmbly member, to be clear, right? So yeah, so that was where it started, and work continued. And now you see I have actually with some metal, and that's what we have today. So this is my second prototype, and the idea is you have a frame that is pretty solid, right? This can be attached to the back of the truck the way you saw it, and then from the corners I have drilled some holes here. You can probably see some here. There are some holes. From here it gets attached to the existing attachment points to your truck, so you don't need to drill holes to the truck bed. And these are angle irons. The initial idea was that if it's an angle iron, you can take any of these. I don't know if you guys are familiar. This is a standard attachment points using like a hitch attachment point. Just it's a 1-inch metal, so you can simply attach these things and just stick it in, and it will stay in place, right? So this is how standard attachment is done for most of the things that we attach to our pickup trucks. So the idea is, if I can create this frame and this primary attachment point, then anyone can create any kind of attachment, or even use their existing carriers and simply attach to this instead of buying a specific attachment mechanism for their pickup truck bed, right? So this was the idea. Second prototype right now developed. I need to improve this. I need to improve the attachment points primarily. That is to make this whole thing much more stable in the truck. So let's see what I have here. So you'll see that this is attached to a truck with just these hooks, right? That's not going to take any load, right? And also it's not going to be stable because it is purely based on tension. There is no stability to this. So I need to have much stronger attachment points to the truck. And I need to figure out how this can be made such a way that this can really take a lot of load. And I need to increase the gauge, the thickness of the material here, because right now it is an 1/8 of an inch, and I need to go at least 3/8, if not more than that, to make this stronger and take a lot more load. I need to make this a little bit longer, so there's a little bit better leverage to support whatever load that gets on it. But fundamental idea is pretty straightforward, and this can be attached all the way to the back, like it is in that pickup truck, but also it can be attached in the middle if it's a 8-foot bed, and towards the tailgate, so that you can put stuff on top. You'll have a level supporting structure, etc. So there's a lot more that can be done once the fundamental problem is solved. So that's it, pretty straightforward, and hopefully I can make it happen. That's it. Any questions, thoughts?
So question on the yeah, that's a nice design. So on the
And I
angle
don't know if
iron,
the microphone was on at all the whole time. It was okay.
on the angle iron, have you thought about tubing, square tubing?
Yeah. So the initial idea was using square tubing,
Yeah.
right? And I was trying to, I got some square tubing, and it turned out to be the same size as this. Obviously,
Okay.
it's not going to fit.
It's not gonna work.
I'm like, what else do I have around? So ultimately, when I do this, it's probably going to be square tubing, and slightly larger than the standard,
Right.
1-inch thing, so that it can go inside and fit properly.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very
That's-
cool, though. Thank you.
That's the idea. Yeah. Anyone else? Anything else?
Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
So I saw that on your first slide it said patents pending. Could you talk a little bit more about that, what you're planning to patent? And if you're patenting it, then are you planning to take this to the market?
Yeah, definitely. That's the idea. So the patent is on the utility of this kind of a system, right? A multi-purpose axis or a attachment point that is installed in the truck bed. See, the idea is it's like a hitch, right? Every truck has a hitch at the bottom. You can only attach one thing to it. But if that hitch was inside the truck, right, in the bed, and there were multiple points, then you can do a lot more with it. So that concept is the utility patent that's been applied for. And yeah, the idea is to take it to market. Yeah, of course.
So did you make this particular prototype inside or outside the makerspace?
This was made at home in the garage. Yeah, I think the only thing I used here is the bandsaw to cut a straight cut.
Do you think there's something or a tool available here in the makerspace that you could, use it to your advantage in order to further furnish this project?
Yeah, so I could have done this whole thing much, much faster. And if you see, some of the nuts are missing. I think if I turn it upside down, you'll see. See, some of these things are not aligned. That's because I'm hand drilling it, right? If I was using the proper tools that are already here, this would have been much, much better, much faster, and I would be probably cutting these off and installing the square tubing and all that. Would be simpler, faster, definitely.
Like, what tool would be better for making those drills?
Say again, please.
What tool would work better for making those drills, for drilling those holes?
I would probably just use that drill press, or that I would probably use a drill press, or that other one. I forget what it's called. No, you all would know better than I do. The mill. The mill. Yeah, the mill would probably make beautiful work out of this. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, how are you thinking to make it more stable? It looks great, by the way.
Yeah, so it's all about having 3 attachment points, right? So the idea is to have 3 attachment points at the top and 3 at the bottom. So I can get 2 points with one on this and one on every truck bed has a corner stake pocket, right? So the stake pocket will give me the second attachment point, and I need a third attachment point. So for the third attachment point, to avoid the drilling of the hole or doing any kind of alteration to the truck bed itself, I can just use a rail with one of those standard clamps you can get.
Right.
So that will make the attachment points very straightforward. Yeah.
Any other questions?
All right.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. All right. Thank you for everyone for coming. So that is the last of our presentation for today. And to just have two other things that I want to mention. Next Saturday, we have a ceramic demo, which is free and available to everyone. And that is taking place from 10 to noon. We'll be making a little pottery, right? You don't need to bring anything, just show up and we'll have fun together. And the second thing is we are putting together a summer camp for the children. So you have kids at home that you don't know what to do with, send them here. All right, thanks again for coming, and hopefully you enjoy the presentation. Another round of applause for all the presentations today, please.